Hi everyone. Basically, I'll be talking about kites, and I want to run through a couple of other topics as well. There's not much contrast, but there will be some pretty pictures. We use a lot of imagery in OpenStreetMap, right? But there's obviously a number of people who would rather use only GPS, and there's this recurring topic of kayaking around Australia, and there was one person, I believe, who swam around a small island with a GPS between their teeth to capture the coastline, but it's fun, but it doesn't sound sustainable. I think this was the Icelandic Wikipedia guy, Avar Bjarmason. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And so yeah, imagery is useful, not only for mapping, but also for reference, for checking, like instead of the citation, in the spirit of the citation needed tag in Wikipedia. It's also a good background for a map that just has streets, and there is just blank space between, right? When you have no land is there. So like in Google, it's nice when the imagery shows through the map, and there are a number of other uses. So yeah, I think imagery is useful, but it's pretty. The availability is pretty low. The big companies have imagery for the US, for Western Europe, and for the biggest cities in the world, but it's usually out of date. We've heard from Microsoft yesterday they have a pretty good plan about going forward with their imagery, with the coverage, but it's a pretty long-term plan, and they're pushing the US and Western Europe right now. So there was also talk about Africa, but there's no schedule. So usually it's out of date. I copied this from somebody's slides. It's how the coastline changed in about a week after during the Katrina hurricane. So changes can happen at a pretty quick rhythm, and so I don't know. In Bing, the average last update for all the high resolution tiles must be something like 2006 or 7 right now. I'm not sure. In my city, it's 2003. But there are places where you have 2010 or 2009 that are already. Yeah, and we can use this imagery from Yahoo or from Microsoft in OpenStreetMap, but it's still not freely licensed in the open aerial map sense. There's also, yeah, yesterday we heard from Scholar about Space Chapter, and this is government-owned imagery, and again it has limitations like non-commercial usage only, and I'm not sure why, but it seems that satellite imagery in general is much more strictly controlled than aerial imagery shot from planes, even though it's lower quality usually. But there's some, the release process by the owners of those satellites is somehow much more complicated. I'm not sure why that is. So yeah, that's why the availability is not really satisfying. It's usually out of date, but there's the only exception I think I remember is the near map in Australia. I'm not sure, perhaps there are other companies but elsewhere, but this is the only instance where I've seen a company committed to updating their imagery every 2 weeks. Other than that, I have not seen a company that has like a schedule and is committed to updating every some time. So it would be really cool to crowdsource imagery like we do with map data, right? This is just the live view of edits on some given point in time. And if this could happen for making imagery, we could probably quite soon have good coverage. And it would, community contributed imagery would always be current when needed, because you could just always go out and make new imagery if you knew that something had changed. The coverage would not be only economically decided, and yeah, there's also the problem with stuff like Bing imagery and Yahoo. We can't really upload it to a single big repository like OpenedHand Map, so that we could have a single WMS with all of the imagery that we have usable for OpenStreetMap. We have to keep a bunch of different URLs to all the WMS servers and always select the right one. And it would be available ahead of a disaster if we had full coverage now and we didn't depend on some company providing storage for it, like on Bing. And there's a number of methods. You probably have heard of them. There's lots of talk about kite-photography. I believe there's I believe Mikkelmarn had done some in as early as 2007 or 2008. I'm not sure if he's used it for mapping, but it's not anything new. And there's a number of other methods, other airships we can use. Traditionally, people used manned planes to shoot imagery, but there really seems to be no reason to do that anymore. It was just for probably based on technical issues, but there really seems to be no reason to send a person who weighs perhaps some 70 to 80 kilograms on average in the air just to push the shutter of the camera, right? So it makes much more sense to just send a really small device in the air and like a kite or an RC helicopter and make it shoot automatically or have it RC controlled. There's a number of crazy ideas for doing this. I think the most amount of technical problems have been already solved for kites, and so me and a couple of other people have done quite a lot of kite photography. I've also built a quadcopter recently, but it's not really stable yet. I hope it will be flying stably to about 2 or 3 kilometers high in a week or two, but it's ongoing work. There's people also use balloons, but there's also technical issues, and it's been more weather dependent than a kite. And there's a number of other crazy ideas, like shooting a camera on its own, just up with a slingshot. I've seen people try to do that, and there's Jeffrey Warren of grassroots mapping also wants to use water rocket. I'm not sure if you see how they work. It's basically a bottle, a plastic bottle, and you take some water and a tire pump, and you create pressure inside, and it goes straight up, and it can go up to a couple 100 meters. Last year, someone set the record of, I think, 650 meters, and they had a camera attached to the bottle. So this is what spurred a lot of interest around this, but it's probably quite difficult. I haven't tried. There are other methods as well. Someone in 1903 built 75, he was a German pharmacist, I think, built a 75 grams camera and took pictures from homing pigeons, and they ended up being on postcards later. So what have we found so far about kite mapping? It's not expensive. You'll probably, on an average day, lift the camera to some 500 meters with good hardware and average weather conditions. You can probably, in really, really good conditions, go up to about 1 kilometer. And the world record, this is a ballpark figure, I don't know what the exact record is, but it's possible to go up at least 8 to 9 kilometers high, so that's 25,000 feet, and but it's pretty difficult. And if you use the nanotube line, perhaps it could be much higher. With a kite, you basically go up and down, or at some angle, but you don't have much control over where you're shooting, except the place where you take off. You can take the kite and tow it for some distance behind you, but most of these are full of wires. Even most of continental Europe and US is full of wires. Even in the country, it's amazing how much cables are hanging over roads, and it's really difficult to find a place with 500 meters of free space, really. But I think just last week we had a mapping party in a city in Poland where amazingly there was completely no wires in the city. I don't know why that was. Perhaps there was some administration ban on that, and we tried to walk with a kite all through the city. It was pretty fun because lots of locals got involved in telling us which ways we can take, and it was quite fun. It takes about 1 hour, maybe 45 minutes, if you've got it all worked out to deploy, take off, take pictures, and get the kite back. It's really mobile. It's really portable, and I don't know what the average is for other places, but for Poland, I found in the winter it's about 1 week one day in a week, or 1 day in 2 weeks that the conditions are right for flying, and in the summer it's pretty much all the time. So this is a guesstimate of, let's say, 1 or 2 days in a week on average. So yeah, I'm pointing all those things to compare basically against airplane-made imagery, like what Microsoft was talking about yesterday. If you want to start, if you want to join this effort, then first of all go to the grassroots mapping wiki, and they have all of the basic information. They have it all worked out. They document their stuff really well. They work mostly in the US, but they have like the basic workflow documented. And in Europe, you probably want to buy your hardware from CapShop. If Cap is the keyword you want to look up if you want to find a forum on the internet or something. Although in Poland there's a local producer that, in my opinion, makes better and cheaper guides, so you probably want to look for one that is near you and has quality hardware. You can see your own kite, but it's pretty difficult. Always wear gloves. The line can really cut through everything. Most people use Kevlar gloves. That's the same material as used for bulletproof vests, and it still cuts through. So always wear something on your hands. And there's a number of possibilities to get in conflict with airspace law. So basically know what is allowed and what is not allowed, so you can make the right excuses if the authority has a conflict with you. This is the basic hardware. There's a, oh, I should have related this. There's a camera and a phone. The camera would be enough normally. This is a simplified map of the airspace zones over my city. So it's pretty complicated, and it can change from day to day without any ahead notice. So basically, you should look that up at the website of your local airspace authority. On the day you go flying the kite. And most big cities actually have an airport approach zone. This whole part with the blue dashed line is an off-line zone for planes or airships that are not approaching the landing. So basically, more than half of the city is covered in an off-fly zone. So it's probably like this in most big cities. We had a couple of screw-ups. We killed like 4 cameras so far. This one is a camera with a transmitter. It fell like 300 meters to ground, and it survived. Most of the cameras survive those regular crashes. Our first crash was when we built a balloon, and we were really happy that it went up with hot air, and then we were getting increasingly more panicking when we saw that it's going down over a lake, and it landed in a lake. Then we had a number of other screw-ups or fails, and I think by now we have pretty much experienced every possible thing that can go wrong at least once. So, okay. What is the cost? It's probably less than $20 per square kilometer. This is what Microsoft said in their yesterday talk about their cost of coverage. It's a good occasion to spur people's interest in OpenStreetMap. We get to give out a lot of leaflets when we fly the kite in cities, and people get excited about this. We also have some deal with local scouts organizations. We're going to teach them using GPSs and flying kites and mapping in OpenStreetMap. You can make some pretty cool graphs and pretty cool pictures while doing that. Check out grassroots mapping. They do really cool stuff. Infrared images, they make vegetation maps. They don't put a lot of effort on having big coverage, but they're mostly work on really local, small projects with local communities. There's a number of crazy ideas. If you know more things that can go up and take a camera and tell me, maybe we're crazy enough to try it. Rectification is quite complex. Probably the easiest way to start is with Cartag and Knitr. This is also Jeffrey Warren's software. It's pretty cool. It doesn't work for every type of imagery, but it works on a lot of occasions. Or you can use this more complex. If you're a JOSM person, use this. If you're a Potlatch person, use this. This is just a small tutorial I wrote about rectification with plugin. And you can use imagery to, this is the wrong way to do rectification with map rectification software and using lots of control points. This is not the right way to do it. This is a website with all the imagery I have processed so far. I won't open it right now, but it's there's some cool live viewing of the data of each pictures with the outlines. If you place your cursor here, it shows you which of all the pictures cover this place, and you can download all of them. And this is also the imagery is also useful for building 3D models, and that's basically all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So I think we're short on time, but is there one question out there? Andrew?
How often do you get to go and fly and take imagery? Is that something you're able to do every week, or?
Yeah, in the summer pretty much every second day. We were going to do this in Vienna 2 days ago when we had a little time, but the wind was a little too strong. We started about a year ago on vacations, and so far covered some 50 locations, so that's a couple hundred square kilometers, I think, by now.
Okay.